Hello.
Hello.
We're joined by
Hasan, this
Philip.
is Philip. He is the head of the LCS PA.
Nice to meet you, son.
What's going on? I'm looking at your asks of Riot. So what happened, Philip? Explain to me what's going on. Why are you upset?
Really, the instigating incident here, I've worked for the PA and represented players for over 2 years. Every bit of our relationship with Riot has always been predicated on mutual respect and participation in the process. Until very recently, that's always been the case. Riot's always known that, we communicate together about what's going on. We plan far in the future. And if we have things that, red lines for each other about changes, we try and work them out and we try and figure out solutions that everybody can be on board with. Similar to any group that's in kind of constant negotiations around how how a workplace or ecosystem can be. We're not unionized, but again, esports is a funny space. We're three parties, and really the developer owns everything, right? They own the football, so to say. And so we act as a lobbyist, same as anyone goes to Congress. I think my job is going to Riot. They're the House, the Senate, the Supreme Court, and the president, and our job is to persuade them on how to run the IP that they own. And that's always been really successful until very recently, when between splits, the decision was made without consultation or discussion with the PA to remove the requirement for LCS teams to field, as you mentioned, AAA baseball equivalent rosters, what we call the NACL. Both sides knew that a decision like that overnight would cause the vast majority of organizations to pull out to reap some financial savings, and they did it in spite of our strong protests and in our view, without proper prior consultation discussion about what would be necessary to make the ecosystem functional without a requirement like that in place. So that's what happened, and here we are.
Okay, so you want a Valorant-style promotion and relegation between the LCS and NACL. You want Riot to commit to a revenue pool for player salaries of $300K per NACL team per year. You want to allow the LCS orgs to partner with affiliates or for cost sharing. You want Riot guarantees with LCS minimum contracts for the following year for the 5 players who win the LCS Summer Finals each year, and you want to institute a 3/5 roster continuity rule to provide players on released NACL rosters first priority in maintaining their slots in the upcoming NACL season if a majority continue to compete together. So what did they say to that?
First off, appreciate you reading all that. I'd say first and foremost, our asks to Riot are to make a system that makes sense. That's sort of the first and foremost. These points are, their asks, and they're also the start of a conversation about how do things we know would actually solve the problem. To what Riot has said to these, everyone can see Riot's public statement from tonight. What we care most about in that statement is that, and behind the scenes, we met with them before their public announcement tonight. There was a commitment from them in the statement and behind the scenes to continued conversations and negotiations. We're going to be meeting with them tomorrow, and I am going to say that my focus is making sure those negotiations are fruitful. We have long believed that it's about making sure the system makes sense. We've never claimed that the rule that required teams to field a AAA roster, the NACL, was a good rule, but it was the best solution to a bad system. Slashers talked a little bit about franchising and the issues that it creates in an ecosystem, and market inequalities. If you want to get all capitalist, it creates disincentives to be successful or competitively successful, and it disincentivizes developmental leagues unless you require the people who are staked in the game to participate. So that's what we're asking for. That's what especially bullets 1 and 2 are. It's saying, hey, we need to put a system in place that actually will encourage people to participate and ensure that North American talent pipeline doesn't dry up overnight. So that's the core of our asks.
What do you? Why do you think they are behaving in this unresponsive way, and they're trying to implement the nuclear option of like even tanking the LCS in its entirety for this season?
That's a good question. We certainly don't agree with the manner in which they posted tonight. Our preference would have been to post about the positive things that we're both working towards, which is delaying the season to lower the temperature around the scab movement that was put into effect after we announced our walkout. And teams started reaching out to scabs. We saw undue pressure and coercion from teams to try and make players disclose if they were walking out, to pressure them not to walk out. Some things that have been reported recently that can't speak to details because of personal situations, but it has been a dangerous thing that Riot put in place. And we asked them to delay the season. We said lower the temperature so that we can meet and we can actually come to solutions, and we don't spend all of our time convincing Diamond 1 players not to take the stage in a sham fashion. That was first and foremost. I think their statement today is overly aggressive and doesn't set the tone right for going into these negotiations. But at the end of the day, my job is to do the work and go and meet and get ourselves to a place where our players can feel comfortable about going forward and playing. We want to play. And we just got to see they're going to put us at the table and they're going to actually listen to reason about what needs to happen for the scene to work, because the community is with us on this. They know that what's happening is not good for League of Legends globally or in North America.
All right, so how do we move forward here?
If you're in the public, I think your voices have been instrumental for us throughout this process. Solidarity has been huge. I mean, it's been incredibly humbling to see people who, I said Diamond 1, I wasn't joking. I've had a Diamond 1 player reach out to me saying I was offered a job to go play as a scab, and brought up you can make a lot of money to do that. And the fact that we're here, that they realized it was impossible to run a broadcast without player support, is huge. And part of that's the community. You taking and talking about this and talking about labor movements and the importance of worker solidarity is huge. We need more people to understand the importance of that. And yeah, there's a bullet at the end of this rainbow that says the league doesn't play if we don't come to an agreement in 2 weeks. That's a serious thing to put at stake in a conversation. But it also speaks to the power of players and the power of employees writ large. If people stand up, the means of labor are what create the product. And there's no esports without the players. And so that's what I see today, is that they realize that. And it might have taken them a few days to. We just need the community to keep loud and keep on the Riot about coming to real solutions. That's what matters. Like, if we're going to get this season going and we're going to get to Worlds, it's going to be because we work together, not because we yelled at each other from afar. We got to get in the room and work.
I guess, like you already mentioned, it's the people watching have more power in this regard than in normal circumstances when there's like some kind of labor action. I mean, I guess like the alternative would be to try to fill the franchise slots with scab players, which has happened in the past, even in the NFL, where the player unions do have, I would say, a little bit more power than the LCSPA does over the NFL, where they like brought in scabs. And it's not like you guys have the capacity to go outside of the stadiums and like beat the shit out of the scabbing players, which is what they did in the NFL at the time in Philadelphia, if I'm not mistaken. I don't know where, like, other than players engaging in this walkout, I don't know what other actions there could be. Part of it is there a strike fund or some kind of funding mechanism to help out players throughout this time that are a part of the Players Association? Is there a structure resembling like normal North American unions, or have you guys ever thought about partnering with the UAW or a larger union in North America like the Teamsters, which I'm sure would be perfectly willing and able to help out in situations like that? Is there any opinions on that? Because look, I don't really understand the league space at all. I play Valorant and I play it very poorly. I'm just simply talking about this or thinking about this from the perspective of like labor action in general.
Yeah, no, and I appreciate that. I appreciate your voice in this and helping to bring education on this stuff to folks and just the importance of it. In terms of what we can do next, first and foremost, like, we have to keep up public pressure. You can't let the story die. It's part of our job and it's part of the community's job to continue, make Riot understand that people want the LCS to happen, and they want it to happen with the players that they know and love. Come to the table and bargain in good faith. We don't need a strike fund right now. Our players are still working. The walkout never actually started because Riot delayed the season. For unions, I would love to talk to IEW, Teamsters, anybody. We do have relationships, particularly through our friends and partners at One Team Partners with traditional sports unions. Those groups have been really helpful to us throughout this entire process, not just these weeks, but in the months and years behind, and helping to advise us on how to build our player power and how to kind of awaken the labor minds of our players. Obviously, it's been a big step for us and a scary one, but they've continued to support. It is very complicated because we're in a three-party system, and it's not typical in labor for three parties to exist. Usually it's employer, employee, and we got employer, employee, and developer. So right now, keep the volume up.
It seems like one of the major issues is that the franchise teams did not want to continue having like a farm team, and they basically did not tell you that they were going to stop implementing this. So I feel like part of it is also the franchise teams that are complaining about profits to Riot, which is then taking this action. Is that correct?
Yeah, we don't begrudge the teams for, like, I understand how corporations work. You don't want something that's not pretty on the ROI, and farm systems look like loss leaders, but it's table stakes for being in the game. When they got franchised, it was partly, you said you're going to get money from the developer to run your team, and you're going to get money from the developer to run your AAA team. That was table stakes. And for the developer to just say overnight, well, I guess because you didn't spend our money well, now you don't have to operate one of those like core components of a healthy sports ecosystem, is just deeply problematic. And we've been talking with Riot. The idea of removing this requirement was not off the table, but we were talking about it for 2024. The reality is, pulling this rug from us in the middle of 2023 has caused real harm to players, meaningful harm. We lost at least 35 player jobs, probably more, plus coaches and supporting staff who all lost jobs as well. A lot of these players were here on visas, and were in year-plus leases on their own that the teams made them sign. They had to break their leases, fly home to a region where they had lost residency from because many players from the Oceanic region had declared North American residency through a recent Riot decision. So they no longer have residency in their home country. So these people got sent home with a bill they couldn't afford and couldn't even play competitively. That's the kind of situation we're looking at here, and why we have taken the stand we have, because it's been egregious harm to players. It's the how it's done as much as that it is done. We were down to have a conversation long term about how do we get away from this requirement. Again, that gets back to our asks. You put money on the table, like revenue on the table, to incentivize teams to participate, or you give them a pathway to the upper division. Those are the two proven methods. That's why they were on our list of 5 items we want to meet and work out a real plan, because I know there are people at Riot who care. We're hopeful the next 15 days are going to lead us to some meaningful discussions and actually get some outcomes.
So I have another question about the team's involvement in this. Like the esports organizations, is it not true that they applied pressure to Riot to eliminate this, and then Riot responded? Not to like take away any of the responsibility off the hands of Riot, but is that not another avenue for negotiations to bring the esports teams to the table as well?
They'll absolutely be a part of it. At the end of the day, Riot's the one who makes the call on this stuff. Teams, they receive more money in revenue from Riot this year than they spend on player compensation. So the idea that they think they cannot afford to operate their teams is comical, and they should be accountable for that, and they shouldn't be given bailouts in this way. But we look again to Riot because Riot had the choice. The team's voting means nothing. They're in advisory capacity in the same way we are. Riot had 100% autonomy to make this decision. We look and understand that they're the power source.
All right, that makes sense. So the way I see it is it's a marketing arm of Riot, like the LCS is, and for that marketing to generate value, you need players. Those players are making demands, and you are bringing those demands to Riot.
Yeah, absolutely. Today they're the people. In our eyes, they said where you compete, when you compete, who can compete, and they're the ones providing the funds that pay the people who compete. So when we look and go down the list of the most important stakeholder items for our players and the things that matter to them, Riot's in charge of all of them. And we seek the support of teams wherever we can, and appreciate orgs that have reached out and asked how they can be helpful and said, I don't want to hire scabs, and what do you recommend we do? So those folks have all been great, and we're going to keep working with them, but Riot is the power player, and teams know this too. This is all like the developers are God. It's a space that is not oft considered because it's such a strange thing.
It's especially shitty when the devs themselves do not have a union internally within Riot, which is another way to most likely get Riot to meet your demands. If there was a union for the devs and then they could collaborate with the Players Association, then Riot would be forced to concede or even come to the table with less bargaining power, I guess, because they currently hold all the cards.
Yeah, absolutely. And they do hold the cards. Let's be real about the post they made. They said, we'll kill the league for the season if you don't come and play at some point. And this is a marketing arm for them, right? If it were the NFL, of course the NFL locks out and seasons don't happen. And, in my youth, hockey was played less frequently than it was played from lockouts and strikes. But Riot has different incentives than a traditional sports league in a lockout situation, because at the end of the day, running the sport is not their core product. The game is their core product, and they have different incentives, and that changes the calculus for how you organize and how you advocate, and it's uncharted territory.
Well, I'm with you, and I hope that Riot listens to the very reasonable demands that you guys are making. I mean, is there anything that you want to say to at least this audience or a broader audience in general, as far as like what watchers, viewers, league enjoyers can do?
Stay tuned. We're going to keep communicating. Our focus the next few days is going to be good faith negotiation, getting into the nitty gritty and coming out the other end with something. But we need that pressure from everybody on the way through. This delay is a space that needs to be filled with people calling for the league to see reason, and that's going to be instrumental. So anybody who can speak out and speak up, and if you have connections to folks in labor, I send them our way. We are checking our DMs as fast as we can. It has been a busy time, but we are committed to getting in there and taking every ounce of help we can get. So that was what I asked. Thank you. And just thanks for covering this and having me on. Appreciate it deeply.
Okay. All right. Thanks for coming on, man.
Thank you.